This episode is brought to you by the Marine Corps Association and Foundation. The Marine Corps wants Marines at all levels to be able to make sound and timely decisions, and Marines can hone their decision-making capabilities by being put into situations that require them to think critically. One way that the Marine Corps Association supports this is by providing decision-forcing cases. A decision-forcing case is a decision-making exercise that places participants in the roles of historical protagonists who at some time in the past faced a particularly challenging problem. In that role, participants are asked to devise, deliver, defend, refine, and critique solutions to the scenario as the scenario moves forward in time, creating new problems and opportunities. DFCs allow Marines to develop vicarious experience, develop decision-making skills under pressure, and foster critical thinking and creative problem solving. This is one of the many ways MCA supports Marines through an adult learning methodology. Learn more about our programs and support to Marines at mca-marines.org/professional-development. That's mca-marines.org/professional-development. We would like to thank the Marine Corps Association and Foundation for sponsoring this episode. Hey Scuttlebutt listeners, this is episode 196. This week, we welcome adjunct professor at Georgetown University, executive director for Battle Study Research Group, and author of the book Ground Combat, Puncturing the Myths of Modern War, Dr. Ben Connable to the show. Ben is a retired Marine intelligence and Middle East foreign area officer, was formerly a senior political scientist at the RAND Corporation, and a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ben talks to us about his experiences in uniform and as a foreign area officer, the impetus behind the writing of his book, and the empirical research he and his team at the Battle Research Group are doing to help improve the collective understanding of modern warfare. Ben speaks candidly and authoritatively, and it was fascinating to get his thoughts on the current course of military thinking. Here is episode 196. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you for joining us and your continued support. I'm Vic. I'm here with William.
Howdy.
And we're really excited to be welcoming Ben Connable to the show. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah, this is great. This was actually an easy yes for us for scheduling because you came referred to us by Tom Schumann, friend of the show, and without even really looking into it, like, yeah, let's get him on. And then looking at everything you've done, really excited to have you on because of not only your experience in the Marine Corps, going from enlisted to officer, places you've been, extremely pivotal, not only in Marine Corps history but geopolitical, the landscape as we see it now. But also, you've got this book coming out. You seem like a real free thinker. Seems a little trite, but you're not afraid to oppose sort of conventional thinking. And so really excited to kind of dive into a lot of that really critical thinking about a lot of the axioms and the cultures that we assume are ubiquitous throughout time. So, again, thank you so much for coming down, battling traffic, and being here with us today.
Easy day.
Yeah,
well, I prefer professionally blunt.
Yeah, professionally blunt. Yeah,
All right.
That's right. That's right.
You can work with that.
Yeah, it doesn't do well for retweets, but yeah, you're like,
Yeah, no.
Well, really quick. So just to sort of level the playing field on who Dr. Ben Connable is, you're adjunct professor at Georgetown University Security Studies Program, also part-time principal research scientist at the Center for Naval Analyses, and the senior research advisor at the DT Institute here in DC, a retired Marine Corps intelligence officer, a Middle East, North African foreign area officer, and in 06 and 09, you co-led the Marine Corps Culture Intelligence Program, which I think is an empty building now, but CAOCL, correct, is what we've known for us graybeards. It would have been CAOCL, is that right?
So I was a plank holder for CAOCL. I was the Cultural Intel Program lead with Marine Corps Intelligence Activity.
Okay.
But yeah, CAOCL.
Yeah.
I think that was the pronunciation. Terrible acronym.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're now defunct.
Yeah, which is just awful. We had talked, I think, with Colonel Woodbridge, our editor-in-chief, last time he was on the show about sort of some of the programs that really seem to be leaning into at least a cultural understanding, assigning officers out of TBS regions they had to, sort of show proficiency in throughout their careers. That has gone away. And it seems like we've sort of laid the groundwork for this oh shit moment where we're going to be like, oh, I wish we had some cultural area people or regional expertise. We're talking stand-in forces and sort of alone and unafraid, immersed within these cultures as we try to, battle near peer that stuff. It's going to be like, wow, I really wish we had some cultural expertise out there that we had started at a younger age or whatever. But anyhow, so obviously you've got the pedigree, really excited to dive in, on all of your experiences, DLI, sort of talent management, and then your book, Ground Combat, and all of the, like you said, sort of unpacking a lot of the assumptions that we assume about character of war, nature of war, and this sort of chasing the bright blue, the bright light all the time, like, oh, drones and tech and some of the things. We were talking before we came in. I was taking the quiz that's on your website, not doing very well on it. So I think you're going to learn us all a little something today. So really long way of leading into what was your experience pre-Marine Corps? Like, why the Marine Corps? Was it you saw like the Marine ethos was just calling to you, or was it like I could do this or go work at?
I am the greatest recruiting office sucker story, poster child. They could probably actually put me on a poster with a picture of me looking at those little tiles.
The benefit tags.
Oh, that's right. So I knew I wanted to serve, and I just, was like, the heck with it, and went down to the recruiting station.
What area was this?
New York.
Okay.
Yeah, dropped out of college, went to the recruiting center, and I went to the Army, and they're like, oh, we can get you, money for college and that kind of stuff. I walked by the Navy guy, and he didn't look. It just wasn't impressive to me, and I'll keep it that way. And then I went to the Marine recruiter's office, and he looked up, and he just couldn't have cared less that I was there. Or at least did a really good job of convincing me of that.
Yeah.
And what are you doing here? And then threw the tiles out. And if you've never done those tiles before, it's what matters most to you, and it's honor and service, and then money is there too. And so I stacked them all up and put, of course, honor and service. And money last. And he did a pause, very dramatic, and stared at me and said, "You're exactly what we're looking for." And
nice.
That was it. I was hooked, immediately. Of course, I'm sure that was well rehearsed.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, they did the counter thing for me when same thing, looking what I want to do. Everybody's offering me, special forces, money for college, whatever. And then the OSO was like, I don't know if we could get you in. Like, we're kind of stacked up right now. And I was like, oh yeah, motherfucker, let's watch this. Hold my beer.
Yeah.
So then you sign up, and if I saw this, you were a machine gunner. Is that right? You went 03?
I did. Yeah. I was probably the worst machine gunner in the Marine Corps because I came out of barracks duty. I was at Camp David.
Okay.
8th and I for my first tour. That was really interesting because it was right in the middle of the crack epidemic in the late 80s.
Okay.
And we were doing security on the streets in Southeast DC.
About to say Southeast DC.
Yeah. Tight crew there of Marines from 8th and I and Camp David. I'm still in close contact with a lot of them. That was from the late 80s. Then I went out to 3-9. But I was like a barracks corporal, and so I deservedly got no respect. And I was in the Gulf War though, with 3-9.
Okay.
Task Force Papa Bear. I was in Colonel, then Lieutenant Frank Donovan, now Lieutenant General Frank Donovan's platoon. And he was terrific. Some really solid Marines, and we did our job.
And is that where you're sort of like Like, were you reading the tea leaves as far as like the Marines' involvement in the Middle East? Is that what led you to that, or no? It was just
no, I was
give me the
like
hell
a
out of here.
19-year-old knucklehead. I think I was maybe 20 by the time I went out there. I mean, I was just along for the ride, and I volunteered. It was kind of a funny story. I had orders to 2-9. And back then, a corporal would tell you where you were going. You would check in. It was all paperwork. And he said, well, where you're going to 2-9. I go, well, but I had gone to a chemical biological defense course at Camp David. And they go, oh, well, we're going to need you. And he just immediately switched my orders right then and there. 2-9 was the only battalion that didn't deploy, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Yeah. Well, they have a good choice then, right? Yeah. So then you went MECEP directly after? Is that
I did.
sort of the progression?
Yeah. That is a terrific program.
Unbelievable.
It's the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, basically NCO to officer.
Yeah.
And I went to the University of Colorado. But I will credit my experience, even as a kind of a crappy NCO, to giving me the mindset that you alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, which is, this be blunt and be straightforward, be critical, don't be afraid to speak your mind. But if you do speak your mind, have a plan of action to make up for it. So, have a recommendation. And as long as you come in with a recommendation, as long as you're professional, then you're doing the right thing. And so I carried that with me through the MECEP program into my time as an officer.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. And just for those who aren't aware, the MECEP program is an opportunity for enlisted Marines to be awarded essentially a college scholarship with stipend for housing and food, basically BAH, and non-competitive promotion while you're in the program with a payback tour, obviously, once you're through. If I had known about this as a young man, I probably wouldn't have gone to college. It's such a fantastic thing. And I encouraged when I was a platoon commander, company commander, or even battalion XO, like, let's use, because in a lot of ways, the screening process is really, can you get the package together? Like, that's where you get most of your attrition. And especially now, there's so many universities offering this program. If you're listening and you're considering college, but you feel like you have to get out of the Marine Corps to do it, you do not. Look into MECEP. It's an unbelievable program.
Yeah, I agree. I can't say enough about it.
Yeah. So great. So then Intel then. So you go to TBS, quality thirds. Was it something?
I wound up getting military police because I think I was like aiming squarely at the bottom of the top third.
Yes, that's right.
And I was, terrified.
I was top of the bottom, actually.
Yeah, I had like this kernel of fear that I was going to be put into an MOS that I definitely did not want. And I won't list any of those, but you all know who you are. So there were only two ways out, Intel and MP. And because I had been at 8th and I, MP was a possibility. So I actually was a military police officer for my first tour.
Okay. Lat move then into Intel? Is that?
I lat moved later,
okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And then once you're in that pipeline, then DLI followed suit, or?
I simultaneously applied for the Foreign Area Officer Program, FAO, and a lat move into Intel, and I got both approved at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Coming out of a tour in Okinawa, where I had been lucky to be on the 4th Marine staff, which was amazing. Just kind of full immersion into the Pacific Theater.
Yeah.
Life. But,
interesting. So these cards just sort of fell into place then. It wasn't sort of premeditated like, hey, I've been to the Middle East.
No premeditation for anything in my life. So this is one of the things I tell students and people that I sometimes mentor now as an older guy. You just sink yourself into whatever's in front of you with a fanaticism. You just drive yourself into the deck, focused on the thing right in front of you and commit fully to the organization that you're with now. And don't worry about what comes next, because if you do the right thing in the present, it'll all pay off.
Yeah.
So,
no, that's great words. I had this really horrible characteristic of always looking at what's next, even while I'm still learning what the hell it is I'm doing. I'm already thinking about what's next. That's great.
ADHD helps with that.
And then, so as your experience as a foreign area officer, I want to say that, and I might be jumping ahead through your career, but you were the attaché in Jordan.
Yeah, I was jumping ahead. So
Okay.
I did. I went to Naval Postgraduate School, got my degree, got my language training at DLI, went to Cairo for a year, and traveled around the Middle East, which is great. So that's the FAO.
This was pre 9/11.
That was 9/11 happened while I was at Arabic language school.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so it was a bit of
how was that actually? Like, yeah, how was like? Is this one of these like, oh shit, this is red? Now I get granted you're already a combat vet, but I mean, for me 9/11 because I came in through the Clinton era was not something that was like quite literally on the radar. So it was very shocking and things got very real very quickly. You being at DLI as a Middle East, future Middle East FAO and Arabic student, what was that like for you?
I mean, were you just like, my business is about to get a lot busier?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we all were. I mean, because I was in the Arabic, cohort there.
Yeah.
And, we had a lot of young students in there and we had some conversations with them like, well, this is it. We're very clearly going to war now.
Yeah.
Everybody immediately knew that we were going to war. The base, there was even concern all the way out in Monterey, California that we were going to get attacked, which, in retrospect is a little bit silly, but the feeling was very real. Mm-hmm. And we transitioned to a wartime footing almost on a dime.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. So, all right. So now you're in the middle, you're in Egypt.
So Egypt, and then I went back to headquarters Marine Corps as an intel officer, and was a Middle East desk officer there at headquarters Marine Corps. And then I just volunteered to deploy one time after another, into Iraq. And I got to do the march up, with the division forward command post. And then I returned into Anbar with General Mattis as his cultural advisor and as an intel ops officer with then Lieutenant Colonel Gruen, retired 3-star now. And then my last tour, I was the senior intel officer in Anbar province, working for Pete Devlin.
Yeah. What year was that?
So invasion 03, then 04 for the Anbar tour. So
was that Fallujah Ramadi?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in Camp Blue Diamond in Ramadi. And then in 05, 06, I was back as the intel officer. I did Ramadi and Fallujah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. You really racked and stacked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like in Egypt post 9/11? I've really never talked to anyone who was in that area. Like, what were our regional allies like? What was the feel?
Stunned,
I
think would be the right term. I mean, it was vacant. I mean, this is a part of the world that thrives on tourism.
Yeah.
And so Egypt, Jordan, all the countries that I was traveling to had this huge tourism deficit. I mean, I went to the Valley of Kings and I was the only one there. I went to, every place I went, it was like I had the whole world to myself. So as a tourist, which was part of my job to go travel around, it was fantastic, but it was terrible for their economies. I mean, they probably still haven't recovered from it. And psychologically, this is an important thing to keep in mind as we deal with the Canadians and Europeans and Mexicans now, is that in my experience historically, also I think in literature, if you engage with people directly, point to point, they'll tell you, I have no issue with you.
Right.
It's your government. That was the same mindset after 9/11 as well.
Okay. Was there, because one of the really salacious things that media outlets were doing here were showing sort of the Arab, and I use air quotes because you can't see what I'm doing, but I put Arab in air quotes because the media at that time sort of portrayed anybody who was brown and not from South America as Arab. Right. And so they were showing sort of the Arab response to 9/11. Of course, it was the most sort of flag rallying sort of depictions. What was your experience? Because I've heard from folks who, that there was actually a sense of sadness and forlorn, being really forlorn over the thing, kind of already understanding what the response is going to be like and what its effect on their lives are going to.
That's a better description.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it's it's average people. It's normal people going about their daily lives. They don't walk around for the most part harboring animosity and screaming into cameras. I mean, that's a soda straw view, and it's a very select one too. No, I didn't experience any of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Okay, and then you leave the Marine Corps, and then that's you end up. Oh,
well, then I did. So my last couple tours, I was at Marine Corps Intelligence Activity here on Connable, which was great. I really enjoyed it. Great learning experience. I got to work with some incredibly smart folks. And then my last tour, I was an attaché, which was also terrific.
That was
I had one great
Yeah.
tour after another.
Yeah.
And then, I was at the embassy in Algiers for a little bit, and then I went to Amman, Jordan for 18 months as a Marine and Naval attaché, and that's how I closed out my career.
Yeah, I can't say enough. All of my experience with the Jordanians has been just absolutely outstanding. Obviously they were just an absolute key ally during the Long War, especially with us. And I was out even though I was in Anbar, sort of along Wadi Haran there at Abu Hayat, we still had a lot of interactions out west, and just the Jordanian intelligence and stuff that they were feeding us, and the cooperation we had, like at KV and Al Qaim stuff, was just unbelievable. And then I worked with some Jordanians when I was in UAE as well, and just I can't say enough about that partnership and everything that they did, enabling us to do our mission. So
they're real professionals, and I still count a lot of them as very close friends. I go back frequently. Still stay heavily engaged in that area, and also in Iraq too. But I may or may not have crossed over the border at one point as an attaché to say hi to some Marine friends on the other side.
Nice.
That was fun. If it happened, it may not have.
Yeah.
But there was a really sharp colonel on the Jordanian side working that border in a very tense time, and I know there was a lot of great support there.
Great. That's so cool.
So how do you transition from the Marine Corps and then to academia?
Terribly. I had no plan, even though I had a family, I had a wife and a kid on the way. I did what I always done, which is ADHD, committed myself to the job at hand. And I will tell you, if you're retiring, don't ever do it from overseas. Really, really challenging to do that.
That was UAE, and 5th Meb was my...
Yeah, really brutal. But I got really lucky. I was asked to speak at a workshop on Anbar Province with Ray Gerber. Some of the listeners may know who Ray is. And just so happened there's a guy from the Rand Corporation there, and he was listening to me talk about Anbar, which was one of my areas of expertise. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't have a plan." He goes, "Send me your CV." And 2 days later, I had a job at Rand.
Wow.
It was amazing. Really amazing. And that went on to be a terrific experience as well.
And then you're still focusing in the Middle East then through Rand? Or
diversified?
Okay.
I mean, Rand, one of the great things about Rand, so if anybody's unfamiliar with it, it has within it federally funded research and development centers, which are kind of like half government, half private research entities. And so it's a flat-ish organization. It gives you an amazing opportunity to work on many different areas. So I was doing a lot. Yeah, I was doing a lot of Middle East stuff, but I was doing insurgency, counterinsurgency theory, counterterrorism, conventional warfare, Asia. I got to travel all over the world. I did a lot of Afghanistan work when that heated up. So it was a really fascinating, diverse intellectual experience. And I got to engage. What was really great about it is I stayed engaged with Marines, with soldiers on a routine basis. I got to go out around the country and around the world interviewing them and being in the field with them and seeing things through their eyes, which I then tried to convey back to the policymakers in DC.
That's cool. Yeah, when we mentioned before we started recording that you were doing actual classes and briefings for units that were working up, right? So like we were talking about Afghanistan. So you were actually working with those units that were in the chute. Yeah.
And I was lucky to have amazing real Afghan experts. I was not one, but like Arturo Munoz and Dave Phillips, they're talking to bringing them out to speak with Marines and soldiers before they deployed. Hopefully we helped a little bit.
Yeah. I got my route to Afghanistan. I was INI in Jacksonville got orders and I was told, but don't get an apartment. You're leaving like in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a lot of that kind of workup stuff, but based off of the performance of the Marines, they were definitely ready to go. I think I was the one holding them back. But so how did you end up then at Georgetown?
Part of being at Rand is there are actually quite a few Rand folks that teach as adjunct at Georgetown, and somebody suggested it, and I got invited over, and I've been teaching there for over 10 years now. I only teach one class a year. I started out with insurgency and counterinsurgency, and then I created a course on human behavior in war, centered on some work on the will to fight that I had led at Rand in the last, I think, 7 years that I was there. But Georgetown is also a terrific institution.
Sounds like an interesting course. Who do you have like on your syllabus for recommended reading for that?
So I have 2 books. One is Inside the Insurgency. I'm sorry, the name's escaping me at the moment. The Algerian Insurgency by Zora Dreef. The title is wrong, but it's a female insurgent's kind of autobiographical explanation of what the insurgency was like. And it's really her book was the inspiration for the movie The Battle of Algiers, if you've ever seen it. Yeah. And then the other one is Lord Moran's Anatomy of Courage, which any Marine should read. That should be, if it's not on the Common Notes reading list, it should be on the Common Notes reading list. Yeah. And then I've been told I overload the students with everything else because I want them to read all of it. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we've asked, I think, a lot of the, Vic has asked a lot of the good cop questions. Now it's bad cop time. You currently have a book that's coming out in this month, correct? March.
It's out.
It's out. It is out. Perfect. Now. All right, go get it. But so the title is Ground Combat: Puncturing the Myths of Modern War. So just for our audience sake, quickly just address, what question, what gap in academia were you trying to answer or fill? What's your thesis? And then we can go from there.
When I was at Rand, I was repeatedly frustrated by the lack of kind of constructive analysis of modern warfare. We had a lot of kind of deep dives on specific events. We had a lot of political and socio-political analysis of war, but we really didn't have like that kind of traditional, historical, on the ground, consistent approach to understanding what happened. So in general, in the United States, we've stopped treating war as history. We treat war as a political, this is in academia, as a political and social phenomenon, which is fine because the politics and the social aspects of warfare are essential for us to understand. But abandoning the history part of it, which we've done to a significant extent, means that we don't see what has actually happened. And if you don't know what has actually happened, then you're bound to start with bad assumptions and then draw bad conclusions from this impartial data that we have. So one of the things I really wanted to do was build this database of modern combat and to try to make it as comprehensive as possible. Zero interest across the Department of Defense in doing that kind of basic research. Zero interest from the military historical community because it takes money to get people out into the field to do these things. So
wait, is that really the rub? Is the money, or is there just a lack of intellectual curiosity?
The curiosity is there. The capacity is mostly gone. I mean, there's don't get me wrong. There's still military history departments in the United States, but they're anemic compared to what we used to have. And if you look at the kind of history, when we think military history, we think like the stuff we read growing up about World War II and Vietnam. It's incredibly detailed and rich. You could tell where people were on the battlefield and the timeline and the narrative and order of battle and that kind of stuff. I mean, just go ahead and go through your head and see if you could pull that up for even battles that we participated in for both sides. It does take money. So one thing that doesn't take a huge amount of money is to do a desk side analysis and start by creating this database, which I did. And that's the foundation of the book is this database of 423 modern battles. So 2003 to 2022, 20-year period.
So, essentially then, I guess the second part of the question is, based off of the data you collected from 423 modern battles, what argument are you trying to make that a lot of academia is missing? Because you said, quote unquote, on your website, you've asked several questions, like what if there is no character of war? So let's start with there. You say that we often assume that we can characterize war with a universal explanation. Evidence from both historical and modern war suggests that there is not, in fact, a universal character of war. Readers may be surprised to find out who agrees with this conclusion. So my first part is, who is making the argument that there is universal characters of war? Because I always interpret it as more of like, it's lightning in a bottle, trying to understand the character of war. It changes so rapidly and so quickly, especially from a historical perspective. I focus primarily Marine Corps, American Civil War. Character of war can change exponentially over the course of several battles or a single battle. So who's making this argument that the universal character of war, that character of war is universal? And then how do you combat that idea?
Well, almost the entire U.S. government is making that argument, and they've done it in writing repeatedly and verbally articulated. I mean, so you got generals, secretaries of defense, so on and so forth, saying the character of war has dramatically changed. The character of war is now X. Because the character of war has changed, we need to buy this new system. We need to divest ourselves of these, obviously we're
legacy
leaning into force design here. And I don't want, and we can come to force design. And I take a middle ground approach on that very, very sensitive and controversial topic. But this work, I do attack force design in my book. I hope I do so constructively. But the basic argument that the character of war is universal is kind of endemic in our whole discourse, right? It's the way we talk about war, and because we haven't defined it, and because we've just kind of blindly accepted this nebulous term, it allows people to make kind of hyperbolic statements like that. We can say, "Oh no, it's changed so dramatically that if we don't get rid of X, or if we don't buy this incredibly exquisite missile system, we're going to lose the next war." And it is almost always painted in existential terms. And I point to Andrew Krapinovich, Bob Work, when he was Deputy Secretary of Defense, very clearly making these statements and very clearly in writing saying the character of war has changed. If we do not buy these things, we will die.
Which is such an interesting thing to hear from the Marine Corps perspective, because that was the argument that has been used many times to get rid of the Marine Corps, that we don't need them anymore, right? Because we have this exquisite, nuclear weapons, for example, was supposed to completely do away with things like Marines.
Yeah.
Right.
So is your issue the definition of character of war that they're using, or the concept of character of war in the first place?
The concept, right? The idea that you can create this universal description, as you yourself just said. In reality, if you dig in, this kind of goes back to why I wanted to build this database to start out with. If you look at the way war has actually been practiced around the world, and not trying to kind of virtually fill in gaps with opinion, sometimes a very strong opinion, then you're left, the only conclusion you can really come away with objectively is to say there is no universal character of war. It's different in around the world at different scales and scopes and different kinds of terrain, depending on who's fighting. So if you can accept that, then all of these arguments about the dramatically changing character of war and the need to buy these things or divest kind of go out the window. Mm-hmm. And so this is an essential policy argument that I'm making here, even while I'm making what I hope is an interesting kind of military history argument. And I have some case descriptions in there that are, I hope are interesting as well.
That's so interesting, because the idea that I'm trying to make a universality of the character of war, when the nature of war is supposed to be immutable, but the character of war is supposed to be constantly evolving and changing, that you can't make it universal. And the fact that a lot of people in the DoD have done so is quite interesting. So to go back into your database to support your argument that you think there is no universal character of war, which you have great evidence for, what information were you inputting into this database? Are you describing battles? Are you just inputting figures? Like, please, let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, let me put a hook for something if we want to follow up with it later about the idea of immutable nature and constantly changing character. Clausewitz never said that, so maybe we can come back to that.
Yeah, that's on the quiz. Actually, I think I got that one.
Yeah, I'm ruining the quiz. I'm ruining the quiz here for a little. If anybody wants to take that, it's online at groundcombat.org and it's free and everything. But So the database itself is a description of as many battles as I could find in the public domain, using as many sources as were available to me, including kind of paid databases and stuff. And it lists the battle itself, a description of the battle, who fought on which side. I try to answer 4 main questions. Who fought and what was the order of battle? What was the geometry of forces? How were they arrayed against each other throughout the course of the battle? What was the narrative of the battle? What's the story? Is there a story that can be told in kind of very basic terms? And then what was the timeline? How did these things transpire over time? And then I very specifically dig into the technology that was used in each fight, down to the rifles that were employed by both sides, all the way up to missile technology. And I code for that so it can be used by students. Actually, there's a team at West Point that's doing this right now with the database, and it's available free online to anybody.
Incredible. So, my question is. Going forward, so you've pulled off all of these battles from various conflicts since 2003, correct?
January 2003.
January 2003. So, I guess my question is, a lot of this stuff, I guess, because you're right, there really hasn't been a traditional, because the idea of traditional versus new military history, the idea of, like you mentioned earlier, just studying the maps, the tactics, the OOBs, try to figure out what actually happened, versus now where it's more, again, like the human experience aspect of it. To what extent do you feel there may be gaps in your own database just based on the fact that there is limited information out there? Or are you just trying to at least be a pioneer to guide other historians to follow suit in you?
Yeah, I think the latter. I mean, I acknowledge multiple times in the book and in the database itself that it is not comprehensive. And I argue that, in fact, we can't know all the battles that have taken place around the world, even in that 20-year period, because we've done such a poor job of recording them, of being physically present. And I am very clear that we know that there were hundreds of battles in Iraq and Afghanistan that are not kind of visible in the public domain. But they are in databases behind the green door that I'm trying to help get released. We'll see. Wish me luck on that one. But yeah, no, I want to shine a light and say, look, we can do this. I was told repeatedly when I tried to do this at RAND, can't be done. You can't come up with this list of all these battles, so don't even bother trying. And that's not something I like hearing. So actually, like you said, hold my beer, right? And so it was brutal, building even this version of it. I'm aware of gaps in it already. And I just hope it inspires other people to do more.
Was this a solo mission? Do you have a team of people working, or?
Solo mission. I did have some research assistants, doubling my effort on a select number of cases just for what's called intercoder reliability but more on sourcing to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
So one of the questions, that you post on your website is, what if drones are not really a game changer? And that's obviously a big one. Just you're seeing drones, in a lot of Gazette articles. It's a common reoccurring thing, especially in the past several years, and further aggravated by the Ukraine-Russian war that's going on currently. Are drones really a game changer?
Yeah, no. We are kind of hostages to our most recent online experience in many ways, and that kind of terminology, the kind of exaggeration that we live in on a daily basis now. This is insane. That'll blow your mind. This is a game changer. Stop everything. We're so accustomed to hearing that now that it's almost background noise. But we've also accepted at face value that drones, first of all, are new somehow, and that they have completely changed the way that we fight. They have not. They are not new, first of all, and I'll get into that in a second. But they haven't changed the way that we fight. And if you spend a significant amount of time examining what's actually happening on the ground in Ukraine, which I have, and I continue to do so, I have a team in Ukraine right now conducting a battle study. We have a previous one called Battle of Irpin River that's available online if anybody wants to look at it, with James Sladden. The fighting that takes place is similar to what would have happened with or without drones flying overhead. Very, very similar. There are minor modifications here and there, but we are kind of enraptured by these compilations of FPV drone strikes and things like that. First of all, drones have been around since the beginning of the 20th century. They were first used in. I'm ruining my quiz here again, right? But
I'm taking notes actually.
I know. I'm sorry. You're going to get a better score now. They were used in combat in 1940. They were used throughout World War II. They were used extensively in the Vietnam War. They were used in combat in the 1973 war. The Israelis and the South Africans really built the modern drone industry, and they used the drones extensively in Lebanon, in places like Angola. And then we fully adopted drones and employed them. I mean, if you were involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, drones were part of your daily life, right?
Yeah, my dad was actually at Dragon Eye when it first kicked off.
Yeah, right, exactly. At all levels. Now, were micro drones anywhere near as ubiquitous? No, of course not. That would be silly to say. Were drones available to groups like the Islamic State in 2012? The same way that they were in 2017? No, of course not. So there's been a clear proliferation of drones at the lower level. They're now ubiquitous. However, keep in mind that, and I made this point for a CSIS panel the other day, that there's a 1,200 kilometer fixed battle line in Ukraine. The entire industrial base of Ukraine and the entire industrial base of Russia is co-located to a static battlefront, feeding drones in from the entire world's supply, all focused on this one war, right? China is funneling millions of drones. The United States is paying, right? So all of these drones are being funneled towards this fixed front line, and they're ubiquitous, but not every war is going to look like that. And now, so again, keep in mind the fighting that's taking place in Ukraine is actually very similar to fighting that has taken place elsewhere. And there's a unique aspect to the industrial fixed nature of the fight too. So I will make a very strong argument. I'll go down swinging on that one that drones have not changed warfare.
And what you mean by it's the same as where you would see it in other places is we're talking orders of battle the same, troop strengths, positions, named area of interests, indirect, direct, FPCs, FPFs, all of those things you learned at TBS, right? During, offense, defense, and all that good stuff. I mean, is that essentially?
I teach a class on the book, and one of the things I do is I show a video montage, a drone video montage. I mean, by the way, there are new ones produced every single day. The Ukrainians and the Russians churn them out. I probably watch 100 to 150 drone strikes a day on various websites, Telegram channels, things like that. And then I show trench combat, infantry combat, mechanized assault montage videos. And I say, if I split you into two different rooms and I just fed you on a steady diet of one of these two and put you back together, the two groups would have a completely different perception of what war is. And what the reality is that war is both of those things simultaneously.
Okay.
So drones are there.
Yeah.
They're absolutely having an impact. But in a large part, both sides are relying more heavily on drones because they can't rely on their air forces. Ukraine has an anemic air force compared to the Russians. And the Russian Air Force has been significantly damaged and wasn't as strong as we anticipated it would be at the beginning of the war. So, I mean, there's a compensatory factor here as well.
So you're making the argument that drones are not changing the character of war, but it goes back into this. What a lot of other people are saying is like we need to buy this equipment. It's necessary for us to sustain ourselves. Do you not believe that Americans should be investing in drones? Do you think that maybe even if the character of war has not changed, there's still worthy investment? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question because our culture now is essentialist, right? So whatever question you're asking, it either has a binary answer, right? It's either all of this or none of this, or and of course that's not how life generally works. Of course, we should invest in drones. Of course, we should try to maintain a technological advantage over our current adversaries and our prospective adversaries. Absolutely. And I think it's very easy to kind of dismiss arguments like mine by saying, well, you're neo-Luddite, right? And which, by the way, complete misunderstanding of what Luddism was. But right, but I'm not averse to technology, but I'm also not a technophile. And the problem with this kind of lack of knowledge is that we are vulnerable to these kind of aggressive technophilic arguments, right? That it basically goes back to the revolution in military affairs. If you're familiar with that, I mean the idea that there is this earth-shattering, game-changing event that takes place, or new technology that's introduced combined with a new tactic or something that reorders the very nature of war, the very nature. This goes back to the hook that I set earlier.
Oh, we're coming back to it. Don't worry.
Yeah. But it's an important one, because the arguments for the revolution in military affairs, for this idea that if we just buy the right technology, that will solve all of war's problems, and then painting anybody that disagrees as a Luddite and not as averse to technology, which is just often flat out wrong. It hinges on the idea that there is this immutable nature of war and this constantly changing character. And so if you want to lead in,
you mentioned that Clausewitz did not say that, but MCDP1 does say that. So do you think, based on your arguments that you made, that MCDP1 could use a rewrite in that regard, and how would you rewrite it?
Boy, that's been tried. Multiple times. I'm a huge fan of MCDP1, and I still refer to it frequently, and I cite it, and I think it is a fantastic document. It is probably the best doctrinal publication in the U.S. military, period. And there's a reason people have had so much trouble rewriting it. However, it doesn't mean it's flawless.
Of course.
And look, I mean, I wouldn't even call it necessarily a flaw. It's a gap. What is the nature of war? Right now, it lists a number of things. MCDP1, it's friction, chaos, uncertainty, dynamism. What am I missing? I think I'm missing a couple there. Yeah, I mean, so the authors of MCDP1 settled on some Clausewitzian terms that I think most people would generally agree upon. But most people generally agreeing on something doesn't make it an immutable nature, doesn't make it an immutable law. And there are elements, there are points in warfare where it's clear as day. If I'm flying a drone over an enemy target and they have no air defense, and it's in the middle of a desert and they have no concealment, I see exactly where they are, and I say, blow that up, and I push a button and I kill it. Okay. I mean, that's not chaotic or dynamic or right. So
or
even, but if Clausewitz never said that, and by the way, Beatrice Heuser, Tony Echeverria, and others kind of back me up on that one. I won't try to speak for them, but I cite the references in the book. Then that whole argument is specious, right? It means that you can't say, well, there's been this dramatic revolutionary change to the nature of war because we've invented nuclear weapons, because we've invented precision-guided munitions, the historical kind of revolutionary military affairs arguments. That whole thing falls apart when you can't define or pin down nature and character. And I would argue that the RMA proponents abuse our gap in knowledge and abuse the lack of definition. And I call them out directly. I'm still waiting for a blowback on that one. I'm sure,
perfect. Yeah. So is there a better set of terminology that you think that we could use to replace that's more productive, or is it worth re-educating and trying to actually pin down these concepts with more concrete, historically informed terms? What
I propose in the book is just saying characteristics and not trying to create a reality that doesn't exist. I mean, if you can't define something, you can't create this clear, holistic, and comprehensive picture of something in real terms, and you're dealing with something very real and violent with sometimes existential consequences like war, don't do it. Just do what we say we do in MCDP 1, which is to accept uncertainty, accept some chaos, accept the fact that there are things we just don't know. And we don't know what the so-called character of war is. So just say, okay, what can we know? We can know characteristics. We can see trends in the use of different kinds of equipment or tactics or the way that people behave in certain conditions. We can see trends in innovation and economic influences on the practice of warfare. So there are characteristics that are observable, and they never give you a satisfying whole picture, but they're definitely worth following.
How is that being received, though, especially in this era where, like you had mentioned, we do sort of fall into this desire for a binary solution. And we definitely are out of an era where nuance is even not only is it not accepted, but it's frowned upon to try to look at nuance. Is your approach being well received, or are you being scoffed at?
I mean, it's well received by the people that are telling me that they like the book. I mean, know, but that's a very small sample size. I mean, the book is selling well. I'll take that as hopefully as some sign that it's being received, at least with some open mind. I am getting broader conversations, though. I am getting a little bit of a sense of pushback.
Yeah.
And that
from which community specifically?
Yeah, is that policymakers or is that military folks?
Military folks, colonels, some majors. I had a couple of corporals and sergeants that I had really interesting conversations with who are not buying into this enormous kind of tech-forward narrative. But I don't have enough kind of data to back up that I'm winning an argument of any kind. We're in kind of a chaotic moment in history here anyway, so I'm not sure what kind of traction I'm going to get. I think, unfortunately, we're going to be in our next conflict before I find out.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you find that it's does this sort of paradigm shift or a mindset shift, does it work well in academia, but it's hard to apply? Or do you see a practical application, a direct application to this sort of nuanced approach to how we prepare for war?
Well, my argument is that the practical application is going to smack you right in the face, right? And that if either you maintain the capabilities that you need to fight an actual ground combat specifically, and if you want to be able to do the things you say you're going to do, then you need these things. And if you haven't proven to me that you don't need them, then don't get rid of them. We can think of some specific examples here. If I'm wrong, I'm only going to be disproven by a series of events. But if I'm right, I can be proven right in one, and I won't be happy to be proven right. Yeah. I want the Marine Corps and all American and allied partner forces to be successful, and I don't want them to come up short because they don't have a capability. They don't have the right number of people, the right type of people. Yeah. They don't have the right mindset.
Well, also too, it seems like through this extensive research and this database that you created, that there's an underpinning for it. This isn't just opinion based off of very limited empirical evidence, right? Like you have the analytics and the underpinning. The intellectual underpinning.
And it's transparent. Yeah. The database is free and available online. It is completely transparent. You can see every single thing that I did. I walk you through step by step the exact process I took. I point out the weaknesses in the database that I'm aware of. So everything is driven by logical argumentation from evidence. And look, from getting back to the characteristics piece, I say, look, okay, let's look at the trends and characteristics. Tanks were employed in, I believe it's 69% of all of the 423 modern battles by one side or the other or both. That means that there was a perceived value for armor, light armor or lightly armored or light armed vehicles. I think was something like 96% of uses. Infantry, 100% of every case. All right. Indirect small arms, indirect fire, every case. So, and artillery was, I believe, was in the 80s. Manned aircraft, I believe, was in the 80% range. So all of what we would consider the kind of traditional core combat capabilities were essential to
MAGTF stuff.
MAGTF stuff. And this does bring us to force design, right? And if we want to talk about that, I'd be happy to.
Well, it seems like you've done sort of like the Moneyball approach with battles since 2003. And you've already identified, 100% of battles there's infantry, 100% of battles there was direct or indirect fire. In 80% there was artillery, 69% there was tanks. So do you think that in order for a military to be prepared for the next conflict, that they should embrace like those specific features that appear more and more throughout the 423 battles that you've observed? So
it's important that we keep in mind that past is not prologue. Mm-hmm. So by amassing this historical database, I'm not saying therefore trends will always continue in this kind of steady pattern. However, they have consistently on a relatively consistent evolutionary trend progressed in the same direction. And so if we're arguing that there's a dramatic break that is taking place right now, we need to come up with some really good evidence to back that up. And all I'm seeing is strong opinion at the moment, and anecdotal evidence, a lot of anecdotal evidence that if you dig into it, does not stack up. And I'll give you an example, the Nagorno-Karabakh War. And so a lot of us that were tracking force design when it was first cropping up, some of the immediate aha, told you so evidence was what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh, where the Armenians and the Azeris and Artsakh on their side were fighting over control of this disputed region. And the narrative, backed by a lot of video evidence from the Bayraktar Corporation, was the drones won the war. Mm-hmm. And that actually was picked up and repeated in the original, I think it was in the Commandant's Planning Guidance, might have just been in the original force design in March 2020. But that drones dictated the conflict. If you go back and look at the drone data from that conflict, that's not patently true. So
that's interesting because I have friends who had family fought there, and like asking their cousins the combat experience, they all point to, at least from their, this could be me bringing the humanistic aspect of war rather than historical, but I mean they did note that at least the soldiers on the ground felt that the drones had an overarching presence. So that's interesting. Yeah. That so what does the data then show?
Well, first of all, the data that were presented by the Azerbaijan government were heavily inflated. Mm-hmm. And Ido Hecht, Israeli analyst, points that out, and he says he kind of breaks the data down. The other one is the video montages from that, primarily from the Bayraktar Corporation. So if you're familiar with the TB2, it's a drone that was popularized by that war. It's a family company in Turkey that makes these drones. They were highly incentivized to, promulgate these videos, and they do look really impressive. But if you look closely, they're not all kills. Even the videos they're collecting themselves are not. It's not clear that the drone itself did the killing. A lot of them look to be maybe artillery strikes or mine strikes or something like that. And so when you dig into the data, even in this kind of very what appears to be a very obvious case at first glance, starts to fall apart. But there are other kind of narrow aspects to one case here too. This is fought in large part in open terrain. The Armenians had been sitting in these open trenches, done a terrible job of improving their defensive positions over time. Their anti-air capabilities were dated and crumbling. Their morale, the will to fight of their troops was very low. They had done a poor job integrating the Armenian and Artsakh forces. So they were highly vulnerable to strikes from the air. And, again, when you're fighting on an open tableau, that's very different than fighting when there's even single canopy tree cover. And so it sure looked like an offset. But the argument I make in the book is that a lot of these human factors had a significant impact on the outcome of the battle itself. But more importantly, in what other historical case do we cherry pick examples that suit our narrative and accept as professionals that's proof of something?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No,
Right.
Excellent point. So you sort of hinted earlier when we were talking that we may have found out the answers to some of the questions you posed in the next war, and part of what Marine Corps, you obviously want to talk about force design. I think we're down for force design.
I don't necessarily want to.
It's fun. It's a hot topic. Force design is obviously preparing us in direction for a war. The Marine Corps' role in a war against China. Is that the proper trajectory that the Marine Corps should be taking?
No. So, look, I mean, it's not the wrong trajectory because, I'm sympathetic to General Berger's original argument to some extent that China is identified as a pacing threat. But I am going to make this argument in a forthcoming series of articles, hopefully on War on the Rocks, that just because something is a pacing threat doesn't mean it's all or nothing. And I know that there's a very good pro force design argument that it wasn't all or nothing, and that's an overstatement of the case. However, the one inescapable document that they can't get away from is a 2019 Commandant's Planning Guidance, which I would argue makes a pretty clear all or nothing argument, and it deprioritizes the ability of the Marine Corps to fight in a land war significantly. While, however, unfortunately for the Marine Corps, still maintaining requirements for con plans and O plans around the world, where it will be required to fight in the unpopular term, America's Second Land Army. The Marine Corps has always been America's Second Land Army. Not since its inception, but certainly since World War I. And the idea that the Marine Corps is not the America's Second Land Army is ridiculous. Point to me a ground war where the Marines have not been heavily involved.
Right.
There's a better story there. The Marines and the Army are constantly working together. But if the Marines don't bring enough combat power to the fight, it undermines not only the Marines who are doing the fighting, but also the Army as well. I'm not going to make an argument that the stand-in force should not exist. I think you can definitely have the Marine Littoral Regiment doing its thing out there, but not have given up. I would argue, most importantly, the artillery capability that the Marines gave up initially, very quickly, without much. I would argue without much forethought, and not coming up with a way to compensate for the cuts to the F-35 program. Look, I think the F-35 is a boondoggle and it's a disaster. The Ace That Ate the Marine Corps article that came out, I'm a big fan of that article. And I was not a fan of General Amos's approach to the acquisition of that aircraft. However, you got to have something that's going to deliver aerial munitions to the fight. And we didn't immediately replace all that capability with drones. So we got rid of our mobile protected firepower by dropping the tanks. We have now, while we're waiting for the ACV, we've got the LAV-25, which that you might as well have a ZU-23, which any insurgent group around the world would have a copy of. That's not enough combat power, not enough firepower for ground combat for a serious middleweight force like the Marine Corps. We gutted our indirect fire capability. We're building it back up, but we did a lot of damage to our ability to provide indirect fires to our troops. We got rid of some of our combat engineering and bridging capabilities. The things that are proven in the data that I show that are still needed all the way through the mid-2020s. So I think we've done ourselves an unfortunate disservice by leaning too heavily in one direction.
I think that's a good cap to this conversation. I like it. So Ben, where can we find your book?
It's available all retailers, Amazon, Georgetown University Press website. If you go to https groundcombat.org. I list links to all of that. You can also take the quiz, and you can also download the database if you want to.
Yeah, we'll put all that stuff in the show description.
Yeah. And do you have any social media presence you want to put out there for viewers to follow you, or?
Absolutely not.
Awesome. Good answer. Good answer.
This has been really fascinating discussion. Of course, I have others. Maybe we'll bring you back on the show, but I definitely want to talk, especially with your Intel hat, about information operations. So it's fascinating that there's so little that we know about recent wars. And, we've got, in this information age, information proliferation rapidly. Like you said, you see 150 drone strikes a day. But yet we don't know contextually or historically much about them at all. So yeah, I'd love to pick your brain on that some other time.
Yeah, be happy to come back.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This is really great. And we'll put all this stuff in the show notes. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Have a good one, y'all.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.